I want to talk about being a man, specifically this line, man up. You know, if you're too weak, if you're pathetic, if you're crying and sobbing and being too sensitive, all these kind of things, it's wrong. You shouldn't be like that. You should man up. You should be strong and powerful and confident and assertive, and that is what makes a man. And there's some truth in that. There is times when you shouldn't just be a whiny little baby your entire life, and you do need to some degree to get some backbone, and you do need to man up. You do need to take on a certain degree of responsibility. But what do you do if you're a sensitive guy? What do you do if you're sensitive to stress, if you sort of think quite negatively a lot of the time, if you're quite neurotic? So this is an issue that I've faced my entire life. And I mean, I came to the conclusion that I had to learn to mask who I am. And I'm still undecided whether or not that is the best way to deal with this, but I just want to discuss it, and you can tell me what you think. So growing up, the idea was, even as a boy, I think you get a few less allowances and to sort of express your emotions than girls typically do, generally. And the idea was, you should have your shit together, or you should at least be working towards having your shit together as you grow up. You might get a bit more of an allowance when you're 6 years old and you're throwing a little bit of a tantrum because you haven't been given a balloon or a piece of cake or something that you want as a kid. But eventually, you need to man up. You need to be strong and stoic and responsible, and just have all your emotions in check and not let anything affect you, to be confident and a leader, I suppose. But yeah, I realized that I was never going to be one of these big, strong, masculine, manly men that just go about life getting what they want. I couldn't be the super hyper confident guy that's just killing it in life. And I tried. I thought I needed to try and change. I spent a lot of time looking at myself and thinking, how can I be a better person? And I went through the whole sort of self-development journey of reading books and articles, watching videos, how to become a better person. I practiced some of the things that I learned or tried to. But I was still me. I was still a sensitive kind of guy. And, I don't know what the answer is here specifically for you as an individual, because you're going to have your own take on this kind of thing. But I feel like the key is, at the end of the day, acceptance. You want to change. You're not happy with how you are, but perhaps you can't change it. And spending years trying to be someone you're not is just going to make you miserable, and that's not good, is it? So really, the key is acceptance, but also balance. Now, when you're young, you're still sort of developing as a person. You're learning how to be a person. You're learning how to be an adult. You're learning, for me, how to be a man. And you do need to consider, I don't know, having like a stiff upper lip, as people would say, and you need to learn to show emotional restraint and to gather yourself. And I think that is a key to being an adult. You do want to be in control of your emotions, especially in public, especially in certain scenarios. You want to know that you're not out of control, and you have at least the capacity to kind of almost switch yourself off to some degree in certain situations. I'm not saying all the time. I don't think it's healthy to just fake who you are your entire life, but you need to know that if the time arises where you need to sit up and take charge, that you're not just going to be a quivering little mess in the corner, sucking on your thumb and unable to, act in the world when there's an emergency, or there's a time when you need to do something. So you need some level of, even if it's just an act, being a confident, responsible person who has their emotions in check. But it can be quite unhealthy depending on sort of your social setting, like your parents or your friends or who you're around with, society in general. I think that there's a lot of expectation on men to be just to always have their shit together, to always be in control, to never experience pain, negative emotion. And I think a lot of that comes down to dating and women having a partner, because that's what this is really all about from like an evolutionary perspective. You know, we want to increase our odds of reproductive success. So being someone who is in control, who is confident, who does have their shit together, that's attractive to women. And if you are completely incapable of that, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to ever find a partner, a girlfriend, a wife. And so therefore you need to learn to have that. And then comes the difficulty of what women will say. Women will say, you know, I like a sensitive guy, you know, feel free to share your emotions, you know, if you want to cry, you can cry. And I've never believed that, because I've seen other women say that to men. Men have said, oh, really? I can just be myself, you know. I'm not saying be a baby and cry all the time, but they're like, oh, good, I can cry during films, or I can get emotional about life. And then certain women get really turned off by that. They promise the idea, again, certain women, that you can be emotional just like them, and they want that from you. Sometimes they'll beg you to be more emotional, but then you'll give them that and they'll instantly see that as a sign of weakness, and they'll see it as just unsexy, unattractive, and they'll be completely turned off by you. So what do you do about that? Well, firstly, I think if you are the sort of person who's quite sensitive, who is easily stress sensitive, you don't ever want to go out with a woman like that. If you're a guy, you're going to have to just leave those types of women alone, and you're going to have to just look for the ones who are a bit more realistic and who do actually value your sensitivity. Because this is the thing, if you are someone who is more neurotic, you might be someone who's a deeper thinker. Not necessarily, but generally you could be someone who thinks about things on a deeper level. You might be considering things that other people aren't, you know, because you have to, because for you, a situation which for everyone else is kind of normal is kind of a danger situation. So you have to analyze and scrutinize and assess the dangers on a completely different level. At least that's how it feels in your mind. So yeah, you need to think kind of more deeply, and you need to be someone who is just true to themselves. And I think finding someone who genuinely, I don't know if I'd say it admires that, but yeah, it's cool with that at least, is basically something that has to be done. And I don't really necessarily want to say I'm one to want to give a relationship dating advice, although I think there's a few things I could definitely say that would help a lot of people. Maybe I'll get to that in another video, but the main point of this one is, as a man, you need to be able, at least, to man up at times. And if you're not someone who is naturally confident and is someone who struggles with anxiety or sensitivities to stress, and you can't always be the person who's sort of assertive, confident, strong, powerful, in charge, don't worry about it, because you're not alone in it. There's loads of people that aren't, and sometimes it can actually work in your favor. Because imagine a world where we were all just strong, not just strong, but like kind of independent, robot-like people who just don't have emotions, and we just don't think things very deeply. I think the world would be a pretty shit place. And in fact, you could make the argument that someone who is able to experience their emotions on a deeper level, or just has an emotional response to things, is someone who is more human and more, well, just capable of experiencing the world in a level of depth that other people aren't. And you don't necessarily want to throw that away, because that can be quite a good thing. It depends on the person, but I really feel like there's just a balance to be had. So two things that if you're someone who is worried that you're not manly enough, or you're not manning up, you're not, killing it as a guy, you're not this archetypal, strong, powerful hero that's going out to save the day, which, to be fair, probably most of us aren't. But if you're worried about it, know that, yes, to some small degree, you do need to man up, or you need to be able to, but it's a balance. You got to also just embrace who you are. You can't spend your entire life faking it. And to some degree, providing you do have the capacity to control your emotions when there's an emergency, when it's needed, maybe you should lean into your sensitivities, and you should just allow yourself to be who you want to be. It's difficult for me to say. I mean, even when it comes to something like films, watching a film with like my partner, or for example, I don't want to cry in front of her, because I see it as kind of pathetic. I can see it as weak. I see it as a bit like cringe as well, especially if it's like just some, Disney Pixar film and I'm getting like emotional over it. It's like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. There's a part of me that feels that's embarrassed for myself. But perhaps you can just cry about it, and perhaps it's not an issue. As well, I've noticed that if you are the sort of guy who on the surface looks very masculine, manly, you got your big biceps and your kind of no shit attitude, I think you can get away with it with, I would say, sort of strangers a little bit more, like the occasional cry. They see it as like a good, well-rounded person. So this is just like a little side observation, whereby I feel like you have a bit of an allowance as long as you're making up for it in other areas. By allowance, I mean just other people don't mind it, or actually find it endearing. But I feel like if you're physically weak in most areas, you're mentally weak in most areas, if you haven't got a lot to give in general as a person, and you're sort of the type of person that's all take, I'm sure you're not like that, but some people are. You probably know people like this. They don't really contribute anything to anyone, and those sorts of people don't necessarily get the allowance to not man up, to be super sensitive, to cry when they want to cry, and to get emotional all the time. People like that are just never going to get very far in life. If very far means respect from other people, and just a partner in life, sexual attraction, things like that, they're going to struggle with that. So it's about balance, and it's about knowing when to show your emotions and be sensitive and stuff. So I just wanted to put that thought out there. It's just a point of discussion, really, like this whole idea of being a man. When should you be a man? When shouldn't you? Should you ever, is it this toxic masculine trait where men are, forced to try and be people who they're not, and try and be strong all the time? Because I think there is obviously a lot of pressure on men to perform and be a certain way, and if you're just not that way, what can you do? And I think there's less stigma about it to a degree. Like, for example, you can be the gay kid at school, the gay boy, and you realise, right, okay, I'm gay, I'm quite effeminate, I'm not super masculine and strong and dominant and manly. And you can kind of get away with that and you'll get an allowance. But what happens if you are a straight guy, but you're also not masculine, strong, powerful, arse kicker? So then what do you do? You know, there's that space there that's quite difficult to navigate. So I'm just putting that out there. Like, what do you think? Anyway, I'll leave it there. Hope to speak to you more soon. And thanks for watching.